Carolina stood in the cold November driveway, staring at the house she grew up in. For 29 years that house made her feel small, but tonight she felt ready. Her husband, Liam, rested a steady hand on her knee. "One disrespectful comment about you, we handle it together," he said softly. "One direct shot at me, we leave immediately." Carolina exhaled slowly. "They will push," she whispered. Liam gave a confident smile. "Then we walk out," he replied. "You deserve better than this, Carolina." She nodded, preparing herself for whatever waited inside. They stepped out of the car, their breaths showing in the cold air as dry leaves cracked beneath their shoes. Carolina held the expensive wine they brought. The front door opened before they could knock. Her mother, Helen, stood there with flour on her hands and tired eyes. "Carolina," she said, giving her a quick hug before turning to Liam. "I'm glad you both made it." Carolina noticed her mother's eyes flick toward the dining room, followed by a tiny, nervous shake of her head. It was the same silent warning she'd given for years, asking Carolina to endure what was coming. 14 people squeezed around a table meant for 8. Carolina's father, Charles, sat at the head as always, his hands stained from decades of auto work. He didn't smile or stand. He only pointed with his fork. "You're late." Her brothers sat beside him. Mark, loud and cocky, glanced at Liam. "Looking sharp, Liam. You tired of her yet?" Liam kept a polite smile. "Not even close." Jake leaned forward with practiced concern. "So, Carolina, how's the job hunt? Any updates?" Carolina answered calmly, "I'm not job hunting." The room went quiet as everyone waited for more. Jake frowned. "Oh, I thought you were still doing that consultant thing." Carolina gave a small, controlled smile. "I am doing that consultant thing." Inside she felt that old sting. They had never believed in her work. They never bothered to ask. They simply assumed she was failing because she didn't brag like they did. What they didn't know was simple. Carolina had started as a fraud investigator, uncovered millions in losses, built her own firm and sold it for over $8 million. Now she was a senior leader at a major company. But she stayed silent, watching them ramble. 3 months earlier, Carolina learned something unbelievable. The company she worked for had purchased her father's failing auto business, which meant her father now worked under the same corporation she helped lead. She told no one. Not even Liam. And tonight the truth arrived right on time. The doorbell rang as Mark bragged loudly about his new truck. "I drive a 9-year-old sedan," Carolina said casually. Mark laughed. "Real adults upgrade." She ignored him and stood when the bell rang. "I invited someone," she said calmly. "Hope that's okay." Carolina walked to the front door and opened it. Standing outside was Gregory Hall, dressed in a charcoal suit that looked far too expensive for the noisy house behind her. "Good evening, Carolina," he said warmly, holding a bottle of wine. "Sorry I'm a bit late. Traffic was terrible." She stepped aside. "You're right on time." When he entered the dining room, the entire table fell silent. Every face turned toward him, confused and curious. Carolina spoke clearly. "Everyone, this is Gregory Hall. He works with me." Her father's fork paused in midair, and her brothers looked instantly nervous. Helen quickly stood. "Please sit. We can make space." Gregory nodded politely, then shook Carolina's hand in a way that looked far too professional for the family to ignore. "Carolina is one of our strongest leaders at Sentinel," he said. "I'm glad to meet the people she has told me about." Mark blinked. "Sentinel," he repeated. "As in the company that bought Dad's auto shops?" Gregory smiled. "Yes, that's right. Sentinel acquired the company 6 months ago." Jake went pale. Charles froze completely. Carolina took her seat again, watching the realization move across the table like a slow wave. Gregory sat beside Carolina. "Charles Hayes, correct?" he asked politely. "I didn't know you were related to our head of risk and compliance." The room dropped into absolute silence. Charles stared, unable to speak. Mark and Jake shifted awkwardly. Gregory continued calmly. "Carolina plays a major role in shaping Sentinel's fraud controls and compliance structure." Liam reached under the table and squeezed Carolina's hand, proud and calm. Jake swallowed hard. "Carolina, you never said anything." She looked straight at him. "You never asked." Mark tried to laugh but only managed a weak sound that faded quickly. Liam leaned forward. So, are we apologizing or negotiating? He asked Jake, his voice steady. Because from here it sounds like you're asking for favors. Jake looked down at his plate. Mark shifted uncomfortably. Charles struggled to speak, but no words came. Carolina took a sip of water, watching each face. No favors, she said softly. No special treatment. Not now, not ever. Mark pointed weakly toward her. But, your family. Carolina shook her head. Family doesn't spend years tearing someone down and expecting loyalty afterward. Helen looked at her lap, guilt written across her face. Carolina finally turned to her father. You once said real work only counts if it looks like your work. Do you still believe that? Charles forced out a breath but said nothing. Liam added quietly, she built something real whether you understood it or not. Carolina continued, you lost the business because you didn't adjust. Sentinel didn't destroy it. Mismanagement did. Helen's hands trembled as she tried to hold her fork still. Gregory watched the family carefully, understanding more with every second. The room felt heavier now, as though years of unspoken truths had finally demanded space at the table. Uncle Fred, the only person in the family who ever defended Carolina, set down his fork loudly. Enough, he said. His voice cut through the room. This isn't helping anyone. Charles glared at him. Stay out of it. Fred leaned back. I'm family too, Charles. I'm tired of watching you tear her down. Mark scoffed. Dad's just giving her advice. Fred shook his head. Advice? Oh. This is bullying dressed up as tradition. Carolina looked at him gratefully. Liam nodded at him with real respect. The tension in the room thickened, pressing down on every word spoken. Jake tried to smooth things over with his usual calm voice. We're all just talking here. Nobody means anything by it. Fred turned to him sharply. She can take a joke, right? That's what you all say. Jake swallowed. Fred continued. You've been doing this to her for 20 years. He succeeds, you mock her. He works hard, you dismiss her. You act like her life is a punchline. Helen whispered, Fred, please. But Fred didn't look away. No, Helen. This should have been said years ago. Carolina felt a strange mix of gratitude and pain rising inside her. Then the doorbell rang again. Everyone froze. Charles frowned. Who else is coming? Carolina stood calmly. Just someone I invited. Helen looked relieved, as if hoping this surprise might prevent the night from getting worse. Carolina walked to the door and opened it. Gregory's presence had already shaken the table, but now the room seemed to brace for more. As she stepped aside, a second man entered, Sentinel's regional legal director, Alan Reeves. Good evening, Alan said politely. Carolina, thank you for inviting us. Charles's face drained of color. Mark stared like he'd forgotten how to breathe. Alan shook hands professionally with Liam, then nodded at the table. We won't stay long. Carolina mentioned this was an important family event. The table shifted uncomfortably. Gregory added, we simply wanted to stop by and greet the family of someone who plays such an important role in our organization. Charles stared at Carolina like he was seeing her for the first time. Mark cleared his throat. So, you're both from Sentinel? Alan nodded. Yes, and Carolina is one of our most trusted leaders. Jake swallowed hard. Helen pressed a hand over her mouth, overwhelmed by the moment. Fred raised his glass slightly. Sounds like Carolina has been doing real work after all. Charles said nothing. Gregory checked his watch. We should head out. Thank you for allowing us to join briefly. Carolina walked them to the door. Thank you both for coming, she said softly. Gregory smiled. Anytime. You've earned this respect. When she returned to the table, the room felt different. Smaller, quieter, exposed. Mark finally spoke. Carolina, why didn't you tell us all this? She sat down slowly. Because you never wanted to hear it. You wanted to decide who I was without knowing anything. Liam leaned forward. You mock her every time she walks into this house. You ignore her achievements, treat her work like nonsense, and then wonder why she keeps things private. Jake rubbed his forehead. We didn't mean anything. Carolina looked at him steadily. Yes, you did. Every comment had meaning. Charles finally spoke, voice low. You blindsided us. Carolina answered calmly. For years, you made decisions about me without ever asking me who I was. Tonight you saw who I am. Helen wiped her eyes quietly. the weight of her silence hanging heavily over her shoulders. Mark slammed his hand lightly on the table. "This is ridiculous." Charles snapped, "Sit down." Mark sank into his chair, embarrassed. Helen whispered, "Please, let's not ruin dinner." Fred shook his head. "Dinner was ruined years ago." Liam added, "We came here hoping things might be different. Instead, it's the same pattern again." Jake turned to Carolina. "So, what now?" Carolina folded her hands. "Now we set boundaries." Charles narrowed his eyes. "Boundaries?" "Yes," she said softly. "No more comments about my work. No more jokes about my life. No more putting me beneath anyone at this table." The room reacted instantly. Mark scoffed. Jake shifted. Charles leaned back. "You think you can just walk in here and give orders?" Carolina met his stare. "These aren't orders. These are conditions. Respect is the minimum." Liam added quietly, "And if it can't be given, we leave." Helen pressed her hand to her chest. "Carolina, please." Carolina looked at her mother gently. "I love you, Mom. But silence is part of the problem." Helen lowered her gaze. The truth had finally cut through the fog of years. No one could hide from it anymore, not even her. Jake tried to salvage the moment. "Carolina, we can fix this. We didn't know how much we were hurting you." Carolina replied, "I told you every year. You laughed every time." Mark crossed his arms. "You're being dramatic." Liam shook his head. "No. She's being honest." Fred nodded. "For once, someone in this family is." Helen whispered, "Carolina, what do you want from us?" Carolina took a breath. "Accountability. Not excuses." Jake swallowed. Mark rolled his eyes. Charles stared at his plate. The silence felt like a wall stretching across every corner of the room. Carolina continued softly, "Tonight wasn't meant to embarrass anyone. It was meant to make things clear. I'm done being the family joke." Liam squeezed her hand again. Mark finally asked, "So what happens now?" Carolina looked around the table slowly. "Now, you decide if you want to be part of my life, or part of the problem." Jake looked defeated. Mark looked confused. Charles looked furious but shaken. Helen looked heartbroken. Fred looked proud. For the first time in a long time, Carolina felt something rise in her chest. Not fear, not anger, but a sense of finally being seen. The room felt heavy after Carolina's words. No one moved. No one spoke. Then Fred stood and cleared his throat. "I think Carolina said what needed to be said," he said firmly. Charles shot him an angry look, but Fred didn't flinch. "You may not like hearing the truth, but she earned the right to say it." Helen looked between them helplessly. Jake pressed his palms together. "Carolina, we can try," he murmured. "But this is a lot." She nodded. "So is 20 years of being treated like I don't matter." The truth lay between them, sharp and undeniable. Before anyone could speak again, Helen stood. Her voice trembled. "Carolina, I'm sorry. I should have stopped this years ago. I knew the comments hurt you. I knew the boys pushed too far. I knew your father dismissed everything you did." Charles muttered, "Helen," but she raised her hand sharply. "No, Charles. Not this time." Tears slipped down her cheeks. "I failed you, Carolina." Carolina stared at her mother, shocked by the honesty she'd waited her whole life to hear. Helen continued, "I stayed quiet because I didn't want arguments. But silence caused more damage than any argument ever could." Carolina took a slow breath. "Thank you for saying that," she said quietly. Charles shifted, uncomfortable. Mark and Jake exchanged looks. Helen wiped her cheeks. "I don't know how to fix everything, but I want to try." Carolina nodded. "Trying is better than pretending nothing happened." Fred added, "Pretending is how we got here." Jake rubbed the back of his neck. "So, do we start over?" Carolina shrugged slightly. "We start with honesty. If anyone feels something, say it. If something hurts, acknowledge it." Mark groaned. "This feels like therapy." Fred snapped, "Good. This family needs it." The table settled again, uneasy but shifting. Charles finally looked at Carolina directly. "You blindsided me tonight." Carolina kept her voice even. "You blindsided me for 29 years." He opened his mouth but no words followed. Liam watched quietly, ready to defend her if needed. Jake spoke up. "Carolina, We didn't realize how successful you are. Why didn't you tell us? Carolina tilted her head. Every time I tried, you made a joke. Or compared me to Mark. Or said I didn't know real work. Mark muttered, "We were teasing." Carolina replied, "Cruelty isn't teasing just because you laugh." Helen sat down slowly. "What about your job?" she asked. "What exactly do you do?" Carolina answered, "I investigate fraud, evaluate business risks, and help protect companies from losing millions. I worked my way up. I built a firm, sold it, and now I hold a leadership role at Sentinel." Mark blinked as if hearing a foreign language. Jake whispered, "Millions." Carolina nodded. "Yes." Charles rubbed his forehead. "You did all that behind our backs?" Carolina looked confused. "Behind your backs. I tried telling you. You didn't want to listen." The room fell silent again, heavy with truth. Liam finally spoke. "Carolina didn't hide her life. You ignored it." Helen looked crushed by the words. Charles clenched his jaw. Fred nodded. "Exactly." Jake sighed. "We messed up. I see it now." Mark frowned. "I didn't mean anything by the jokes." Liam leaned forward. "Intent isn't impact." Mark looked away. Carolina added softly, "All I wanted was respect." Helen whispered, "You deserved that from the beginning." Carolina met her mother's eyes. "Thank you." A small shift began. Slow, uncomfortable but real. Not forgiveness. Not healing. But acknowledgement, the first step of something new. Then Charles spoke again, his voice stiff. "Carolina, why did you bring your bosses here?" Liam shook his head. "They weren't here as bosses." Carolina nodded. "They came as guests. I wanted you to see the people who actually value my work." Mark muttered, "You wanted to embarrass us." Carolina replied calmly, "No. I wanted you to understand that the world doesn't see me the way you do." Jake's shoulders slumped. "We get it." Fred added, "Do you? Because understanding means changing, not just feeling guilty for 5 minutes." No one argued with him this time. Dinner continued quietly for a few minutes as everyone processed what had happened. The tension was still there, but something had cracked open. Helen finally asked, "Carolina, what do you want from your family now?" Carolina looked around the table. "I want honesty, respect, and boundaries. And if you can't give that, Liam and I will keep our distance." Charles scoffed softly. "So you're threatening to cut us off?" Carolina answered, "I'm giving you a choice." Liam added gently, "We want a relationship. But not at the cost of her mental health." Helen nodded slowly, hearing the truth clearly. Jake leaned forward. "What about Dad's business? Is he really working under Sentinel now?" Carolina nodded. "Yes. Sentinel bought the company months ago." Charles swallowed hard. "And you're the one who oversees risk?" "Part of it," Carolina said. "But I don't handle your department. That would be a conflict of interest." Mark looked stunned. "So you outrank him?" Liam answered, "At the company, yes. But that doesn't matter here." Charles stared at his hands, the reality settling in. For years he saw Carolina as the failure. Tonight the truth had reversed everything. Fred sighed. "Charles, maybe now you understand that your daughter has been accomplishing more than you ever gave her credit for." Helen looked at Charles, waiting to see his reaction. Charles finally spoke, voice quieter than before. "I didn't know. I didn't think," Carolina finished the sentence for him. "You didn't believe I could succeed." He didn't deny it. Liam placed a protective hand on her back. Carolina continued, "You don't have to be proud of me. But you do have to respect me." Charles looked up, conflicted and wounded by his own actions. "I hear you," he said softly. The room stayed quiet after Charles's words. It wasn't peace, but it was a moment of truth. Carolina took a sip of water and breathed slowly. For the first time all evening, no one interrupted her. Helen reached across the table, her hand trembling. "Carolina, thank you for giving us a chance to understand you better." Carolina nodded gently. Mark leaned back, exhausted. "So, what happens after tonight?" Carolina answered calmly, "We let our actions speak. Not apologies. Not promises. Actions." Liam squeezed her shoulder. Fred smiled proudly. Something had shifted, small but undeniable, like the first crack of dawn. Dinner slowly resumed, quieter and far less chaotic. Jake tried to start normal conversation. "Carolina, how's work these days?" Carolina answered simply, "Busy but good." He nodded, genuinely listening for the first time. Mark asked Liam about his work, and for once his tone carried no sarcasm. Helen kept everyone steady, offering food and trying to rebuild the comfort she had let slip for so many years. Charles remained mostly silent, lost in thought. Carolina watched him, wondering if he was finally seeing the damage he'd carried through their lives. Yet she didn't rush him. Change needed time. When dinner ended, Carolina and Liam gathered their things. Helen walked them to the door, her eyes soft. "Thank you for staying," she whispered. "I know tonight was difficult." Carolina nodded. "It needed to happen." Helen swallowed hard. "I want to do better. I hope you'll let me try." Carolina didn't promise anything, but she didn't shut the door either. "One step at a time," she said. Liam helped her into her coat. Mark and Jake hovered awkwardly in the background, unsure whether to approach. Carolina offered a small nod. It wasn't forgiveness. But it wasn't rejection either. The night air felt sharp when they stepped outside. Carolina breathed deeply, relief spreading through her chest. Liam took her hand. "You okay?" She nodded. "For the first time in a long time, I think I am." They walked toward the car, hearing muffled voices inside the house. Some arguing, some apologizing, some trying to understand. Liam opened the car door for her. "You were incredible in there," he said softly. Carolina smiled. "I spent years shrinking myself to fit their expectations. Tonight I stopped." Liam kissed her forehead gently. "I'm proud of you. Really proud." A few days later the calls started. Mark apologized first, awkward but sincere. "I didn't realize how much I hurt you," he said. "I'm trying to get it now." Jake followed, admitting, "I made jokes because it was easier than being honest." Helen called to check on her daily. Charles didn't call at all. Not for a week. Not for 2. Not for 3. Carolina wasn't surprised. Pride was his oldest language, and silence was how he survived discomfort. Liam noticed her staring at her phone sometimes. "He'll reach out when he's ready," he said gently. "Or he won't." 3 weeks later, Carolina received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was shaky. "Charles." She opened it slowly. "Carolina, I didn't understand the pain I caused. I dismissed you because I didn't understand your world, and instead of learning, I pushed you away. You deserved better. I hope I can learn from this." She read it twice, unsure how to feel. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't complete. But it was a beginning. Liam read over her shoulder. "What do you want to do?" he asked. Carolina folded the letter. "Nothing yet. Let him keep doing the work." Months passed quietly. Carolina visited her mother for coffee every month. Jake and Mark slowly learned how to talk without cutting her down. Fred stayed the same. Honest, protective, unbothered by anyone's opinions. Charles sent a letter every few weeks. Some short. Some long. All sincere. Carolina didn't answer any of them. She needed to see consistency, not desperation. Liam supported her fully. "Healing isn't a race," he reminded her. "And you don't owe anyone speed." Carolina appreciated that reminder more than anyone knew. For the first time in her life, she felt in control of her story. By summer, something unexpected happened. Carolina found peace. Not the fragile kind that cracks under pressure, but a steady growth within her. She excelled at work, earning another promotion. Liam celebrated his own wins. They traveled, laughed, lived freely. One afternoon Helen called. "Your father is still trying," she said softly. "Therapy, small changes, better habits. He's different now." Carolina listened quietly. She didn't offer promises. She didn't offer answers. Healing didn't require rushing toward the past. It required understanding the present. "Tell him I appreciate the effort," she finally said. It was small, but it mattered. In the fall, Carolina agreed to meet Charles at a cafe. Public, open, safe. Charles looked smaller, older, humbled by time and truth. He stood when she approached. "Carolina, thank you for seeing me." She sat across from him. "I'm listening." His voice trembled. "I hurt you. I dismissed you. I tried to force you into a life that wasn't yours. I'm sorry." Carolina held his gaze. "I'm not ready to rebuild everything. But I'm willing to see who you're becoming." Charles nodded gratefully. For the first time he didn't argue. He didn't defend. He simply accepted. Carolina walked out of the cafe feeling lighter. She didn't know what her relationship with her father would become, and for once she didn't need to know. Healing wasn't about restoring the past. It was about choosing what to carry into the future. She had Liam, a career she built with her own hands, and a sense of worth that no one could take from her again. As they drove home, Liam asked, "How do you feel?" Carolina smiled softly. "Free," she said. "For the first time ever, truly free." And that freedom was enough.